Agatha Raisin and the Reluctant Bridesmaid. A wedding meant to dazzle a village instead unleashes whispers, warnings, and a collapse no one can explain, except the woman who never ignores trouble when it wears a smile. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. You cannot be serious, Agatha snapped, glaring at the mauve satin monstrosity hanging from the assistant's skeletal hands. It gleamed under the bridal shop lights like something synthetic and vindictive. The assistant, who wore the patronizing smile of a woman convinced of her own taste, lifted her chin. "It's very forgiving," she said, in a tone that implied Agatha required extensive forgiveness. Agatha felt a twitch behind her left eye. Forgiving, indeed. The dress looked as though it had been designed to humiliate any woman over 25, and was cruelly biased against anyone who had ever enjoyed a decent meal. Polly Tranter, glowing with earnest excitement, clasped her hands. "Oh, Agatha, it's perfect. All of us matching. It'll be lovely in the photographs." Beth, Polly's older sister, murmured, "Yes, lovely," while wearing the expression of someone being forced to compliment hospital wallpaper. She tugged the strap of her handbag as if planning an escape. Agatha lifted the dress. "Where's the rest of it?" she said. "Surely this is a lining, not a garment." "Do stop fussing," Polly pleaded. "I want my bridesmaids to feel special." "Special as in singled out for public ridicule," Agatha muttered. The assistant guided her toward a cramped changing cubicle that smelled faintly of talcum powder and broken dreams. Agatha stepped in with the grim resolve of a woman boarding a doomed ship. The mauve satin clung to her like static. She yanked at the zipper. It stopped halfway with the obstinacy of a stubborn mule. "Beth," Agatha barked, "give us a hand." Beth slipped inside and tugged, teeth gritted. The zipper refused to budge. "It's tight," she murmured. "Tight? It's throttling me. Try again." Another pull, a small hop, and then Beth lost her footing and collided with the footstool. Agatha lurched forward, catching herself on the mirror. The shop went silent, then erupted in delicate titters. Agatha's cheeks burned. "I'm going to murder that assistant," she hissed. Beth's fingers trembled. "Sorry, I'm just not myself." "No one wearing mauve satin is herself," Agatha retorted, though she noticed the girl's pallor. Beth looked as though she hadn't slept properly in weeks. Outside, the Tranter parents hovered. Lydia Tranter clasped her handbag defensively. "It's important everything looks perfect," she said. "People talk, you know." Howard added, "It's not every day a family like ours has a wedding of this scale. Gavin's very well connected." His tone suggested Gavin was royalty rather than a London property developer with a suspiciously slick haircut. At the mention of the groom, Beth flinched. It was small, an eyelash flutter, barely there, but Agatha caught it. Agatha always caught things people wished she wouldn't. Serena Blake, the wedding planner, drifted over. She had the statuesque poise of a swan and the temperament of a wasp. "Ladies," she said crisply, "let's refocus. The caterers have been briefed extensively. The groom's nut allergy is noted on all documentation. Absolutely no risks." Her smile never touched her eyes. Efficiency oozed from her like perfume. "Lovely," Lydia breathed, as if Serena were a benevolent deity. Agatha eyed the planner with suspicion. People that smooth always had sharp edges. "Now," Serena continued, "bridesmaid's procession. Center bridesmaid must balance the symmetry. Beth, you'll take center. Agatha on the left." Beth blanched. "No, I can't be in the middle. I'd rather be at the end. In case I need to nip out." "Nonsense," Serena replied. "It disrupts everything." "No," Beth repeated softly, but with unexpected firmness. "Edge position, please." Agatha studied her. Beth's fingers twisted together. Her voice shook. Something was wrong, beyond nerves or dress fittings. Polly intervened. "Let her be, Serena. It's only a detail." Serena's pen flicked across her chart with tight annoyance. "Fine. Edge position noted." Howard fussed over cost estimates from the boutique. Lydia adjusted Polly's veil even though the wedding was days away. The whole family quivered with the tension of people clinging to an illusion of perfection. Agatha recognized it instantly. She'd worn that same expression the day she first tried to pass herself off as a respectable retiree in Castley. The assistant reappeared, beaming. "You'll simply glow, Mrs. Raisin. Mauve suits mature complexions." Agatha bristled. I am not mature. I am experienced. Of course, the assistant chirped. When Agatha finally stepped out of the dress, Beth hovered with relief. Agatha caught her whispering to Polly. I wish you'd keep the wedding small, Beth urged. Low-key, simple. Polly scowled. Don't start. This is my chance to have something beautiful. Beth swallowed hard. Sometimes smaller is safer. Safer, Polly laughed. Beth, honestly. The assistant returned with a tape measure and a chirpy suggestion that Agatha size up slightly to accommodate movement. Agatha, imagining the boutique exploding in flames, merely gave a tight smile. As Serena led Polly to inspect veils that cost more than a week's groceries, Agatha slipped beside Beth. You look like you're about to faint, she murmured. Beth blinked rapidly. Just nerves. About the wedding? About everything. Her voice cracked on the last word. Then she straightened and forced a brittle smile. Don't mind me. Agatha did mind. Beth had the jittery air of someone walking a tightrope while carrying a secret she didn't dare drop. The fitting concluded with Serena declaring triumphantly that all elements are aligning. Agatha muttered that the only thing aligning was the universe against her. No one listened. Outside, Polly fussed with her handbag. Thank you for being part of this, Agatha. It means a lot. Agatha, torn between irritation and vanity, replied, Well, someone has to bring sophistication to the proceedings. Polly giggled. Beth didn't. As they parted, Serena handed each bridesmaid a neatly typed schedule. Commit this to memory, especially the sequence of photographs. And please, stay in your designated positions. Symmetry is everything. Beth stared at her paper as if it were an indictment. Agatha marched to her car with her mauve torture device folded over her arm. She felt the cold satisfaction of a woman who had endured an ordeal and lived to complain about it. As she unlocked the car, she caught a final glimpse of Beth standing alone outside the boutique, shoulders hunched, almost trembling. In Agatha's cottage later, Hodge greeted her with mild disdain. He sniffed the satin suspiciously, poured it once, and recoiled as if personally offended. You and me both, Agatha said. The dress is a crime scene waiting to happen. She hung it on the wardrobe door and poured herself a small restorative drink. Not too large. She needed her wits. Trouble was stirring around this wedding. Trouble always gave off a scent. Fear, lies, vanity, sometimes hairspray. Agatha sat on the edge of her bed, replaying Beth's flinch at Gavin's name, her refusal to stand in the centre, the trembling hands. Secrets clung to that girl like damp. Edge position, she murmured, in case she needs to nip out. How odd. But Agatha was not one to leap too quickly at shadows. She flicked off the light, hearing Hodge leap onto the duvet and stretch luxuriously. His soft purr filled the dark room. It was the sort of cosy domestic note that soothed most people. Agatha Raisin, however, felt only the beginning spark of suspicion and the inconvenient thrill that came with it. Those balloons are obscene, Agatha declared, staring up at a lopsided arch of pink latex shaped in ways that would scandalize any passing churchwarden. Who ordered them? Roy Silver raised a manicured hand. Darling, it's a hen night, not a WI bake sale. One must embrace vulgarity. In moderation, Agatha snapped. This looks like a budget nightclub with card tables. The WI Hall, Castley's beloved hub of gossip, cake and occasional disaster, had never seen such a collision of aesthetics. Fairy lights sagged across trestle tables. Paper confetti sparkled under the fluorescent bulbs. Someone had scattered plastic tiaras like mousetraps. Agatha, who had seized control of the evening the moment Polly Tranter faintly hinted at needing help, surveyed her domain with the critical eye of a general preparing for battle. Castley's stalwarts gathered in sensible shoes and floral prints. Polly's friends, sleek, noisy, Londonish, arrived in heels sharp enough to puncture the parquet floor. Beth stood near the refreshments, smoothing the skirt of her dress over and over, eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for a rescue party. Agatha nudged Roy. Look at her. She's jumpier than a cat at Crufts. Roy lowered his voice. She's got the nerves. Bridesmaids often do, especially when the groom's reputation is, how to put it, questionable. You don't know anything, Agatha said, though she wished he did. Polly, bright with excitement and Prosecco, flitted from group to group. Thank you all for coming. Isn't it wonderful? Beth murmured something polite and retreated. Agatha clapped her hands. Right, ladies. Before we begin games, we unveil the cake. She had paid a Mercester bakery a small fortune for it. It was a tower of white icing and tiny fondant hearts, topped with an elegant bride and groom. Agatha had insisted on elegance. Roy had lobbied for something ruder and been overruled. Twice. 2 WI members wheeled the cake forward. Someone flicked on an extra light. And then came the shriek. The groom topper had been decapitated. Not chipped, not cracked, cleanly removed. The tiny bride figure leaned towards the empty neck as if perpetually fainting. Worse still, a banner draped across the base bore thick black letters, "Don't do it." For a moment, the hall fell into absolute silence. Then it erupted. "Who would do such a thing?" Polly wailed, clutching Agatha's arm. "Jealous cows," she added, glaring wildly around the room. Roy leaned in, eyes gleaming. "My love, this is brilliant publicity. We must get someone to leak it." Agatha hissed, "Not helpful, Roy." Beth staggered back from the cake, face drained of colour. I mean, who?" She pressed a hand to her mouth and looked ready to bolt. Castley villagers began whispering like wind through hedges. "Bet it's that jilted ex of hers." No, the developer's enemies. "Have you seen what he plans for the fields?" "I heard he stringed along 3 women at once." "Heard? I saw." Agatha elbowed her way to the cake, ignoring Roy's attempt to tidy her hair. She bent down, sniffing the ink. It carried a strong chemical tang, not the smell of a household felt tip, more like the thick markers florists used on delivery tags. Interesting. Outside the hall's open door, a familiar grumble echoed. Mr. Withers lurked by the notice board, flat cap pulled low. He shook his fist at a poster advertising Gavin Rich's new development. "Outsiders wrecking the countryside," he muttered. "Mark my words, nothing good comes of it." Agatha stalked toward him. "Were you invited?" Withers snorted. "I don't need an invitation to tell truths." Roy fluttered behind her. "What he means, darling, is that he wasn't invited." Mr. Withers jabbed a thumb toward the cake disaster. "All I'm saying is, if a message needed sending, perhaps someone finally sent it." Agatha narrowed her eyes. Withers had the temperament for mischief, certainly, and he loathed Gavin Rich's plans to concrete over fields near his cottage. But sabotage of baked goods, hard to picture him sneaking in to decapitate a plastic groom with such surgical neatness. She returned inside, where Bill Wong stood near the drinks table holding paperwork and looking bemused. "Bill," Agatha barked. "Excellent timing." He sighed. "It's never excellent timing when you say that." Polly rushed at him. "Bill, look what they did to my cake." He examined it closely. "Odd. Very clean cut." Roy whispered, "Symbolism. Delicious symbolism." Bill ignored him. "Who had access before the unveiling?" "Everyone," Agatha said bitterly. "No one guards a cake at a hen night." Beth hovered at the edge of the crowd, eyes fixed on the ruined topper as though it were a personal accusation. She startled when Bill approached her. "Did you see anything?" he asked gently. Beth shook her head too quickly. "No, nothing. I was just watching." "Watching what?" Agatha pressed. Beth hesitated. The door. Suspicious. Very suspicious. Meanwhile, Polly's London friends speculated loudly about ex-boyfriends, business rivals, secret enemies, and jealous women. Their glittery dresses flashed violently as they gestured. A WI member hissed to another, "I warned you this wedding would draw trouble. Have you met Polly? Trouble follows her." Agatha filed all of it away. Every whisper was potential motive or nonsense. She finally corralled Roy near the bunting. "Stop enjoying this." "I can't," Roy said. "Drama is oxygen. Also, darling, that message is chilling. Don't do it. That's cinema." Agatha rubbed her temples. "It's amateurish, that's what it is." But the prickling intuition from the dress fitting returned. Something around this wedding was rotten. At the buffet table, Bill examined the banner more closely. "Smells strange," he murmured. "Not a normal pen." Agatha darted over. "Exactly! It's a florist's marker." Polly gasped. "Are you accusing the florist?" "I'm accusing everyone," Agatha replied. "It keeps me young." A ripple of laughter passed through the hall, easing tension for a single moment. Then someone burst a balloon by accident, and Polly shrieked again. As the evening limped on, Agatha forced games onto the assemblage. Blindfold cupcake tasting, a disastrously bawdy quiz Roy devised, and a dancing competition that ended when Doris Simpson pulled a muscle trying to demonstrate modern rhythm. Beth sat out each activity, hands clasped, watching the doorway like a prisoner waiting for parole. Agatha cornered her near the cloakroom. "You look dreadful," she said bluntly. Beth jumped. "I'm just overwhelmed." "By what? This is hardly a rave." Beth gave a strained smile. "It's all moving too fast." "What is?" But Beth slipped away before answering. Mr. Withers lingered again near the exit, muttering about pollution and planning councils. Roy wanted to interview him on tape for artistic reasons, but Agatha threatened to confiscate his recorder. By 10 o'clock, the fairy lights had begun to flicker, and half the balloons had migrated to the floor. Polly, fortified by bubbly and fury, declared she would hunt down whoever ruined her cake topper if it's the last thing I do. "Unfortunate phrasing at a hen night," Roy whispered. Bill took his leave, promising to keep an ear open, but firmly refusing to treat a decapitated figurine as a crime. "Probably a prank," he said. Agatha folded her arms. "Pranks have messages, this one shouts." When the last of the guests drifted away, Roy helped Agatha gather discarded tiaras and empty glasses. "Darling," he said, "this evening was marvelous chaos. You should do hen nights professionally." Agatha glared. "The universe hijacked my plans," he beamed. "Exactly. That's what makes them unforgettable." Agatha, slightly tipsy and offended by her own enjoyment, stood alone for a moment in the dimmed hall. The ruined cake, the whispers, Beth's pallor, all of it swirled in her mind. Beneath the bunting and Prosecco, something darker pulsed, and Agatha Raisin, who could never resist trouble wearing a thin disguise, felt the faint thrill of mystery creeping into the edges of the celebration. Back home, she flicked on a lamp and set down her handbag. Hodge hopped onto the armchair, blinked reproachfully, and stretched out one paw as if claiming his territory from her perfume-soaked coat. Agatha sighed, kicked off her shoes, and muttered, "If the cake lost its head, someone's soon to follow." Hodge flicked his tail once, unimpressed, then curled up, purring softly, cozy, domestic, and entirely uninterested in human foolishness. The perfect ending to a very imperfect night. "Stop shoving me," Agatha snapped, wrenching her arm out of Serena Blake's grip. "I'm a bridesmaid, not a deck chair." "You're standing in the wrong place," Serena said crisply, consulting her clipboard. "Photographically, it's disastrous." "Photographically," Agatha echoed, "your taste is disastrous." The Mercester Church, with its polished pews and smug varnish, hummed faintly as relatives whispered and shuffled programs. Agatha felt judged by the entire building. She'd barely recovered from the hen night fiasco, yet here she was, manhandled like a prop, while Serena stalked about directing people with the zeal of a military commander. Polly stood near the altar, pale with nerves yet theatrically smiling. Gavin lounged beside her, handsome in that oily London way Agatha never trusted. He winked at the bridesmaids, an act that made Beth recoil ever so slightly. Serena tapped her pen. "Right, once again. Bride enters on cue, bridesmaids follow rhythmically, and for heaven's sake, remember your spacing." Serena sent Beth to fetch candles from the storage cupboard. Agatha muttered, "Spacing, symmetry. Does she think we're decorative hedges?" Beth, stationed beside Agatha, looked miserable. "Could I stand further from him?" she whispered. "From whom?" Agatha asked, though she suspected. "Gavin," Beth replied, voice shaking. "Serena keeps moving me closer. I don't want to walk beside him." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Beth pressed her lips together. "I'd rather be at the end. It's easier if I need to nip out." There it was again, that excuse from the boutique, delivered with even more dread. Before Agatha could prod further, Serena swooped in. "Beth, center position. Please stop improvising." "I'm not comfortable," Beth murmured. Serena's smile thinned. Weddings are not about comfort. The organist struck a wobbly chord and the rehearsal lurched into action. The vicar, a mild, balding man with a chronically apologetic air, tried to guide the procession, but Serena overrode him at every turn. Relatives smirked from the pews, enjoying the spectacle far too much. As Agatha marched stiffly down the aisle, she caught Gavin adjusting his cufflinks and surveying the hall with entitlement. The man radiated self-satisfaction. No wonder Polly clung to him as a ticket to the glamorous world she imagined existed beyond the Cotswolds. Agatha had met enough London types to know that glamour often came with rot underneath. They reached the altar. Serena barked orders. Closer, not too close, arms relaxed, shoulders back. No, back, Mrs. Raisin, this isn't a boxing match. Agatha inhaled sharply. Keep pushing and it might become one. The next run-through began. Polly took 2 steps forward and screamed. The floral arch above the aisle lurched violently. One of its supporting cords snapped with a vicious twang. The entire display tilted forward, ready to crash onto Polly's head. Only Gavin's swift step back pulled her out of range. The arch slammed onto the floorboards with a thud that echoed through the church. Flowers scattered like confetti at a funeral. Chaos erupted. The vicar clasped his cassock as if shielding himself from scandal. Serena shrieked, "Who touched the arch?" Polly burst into tears. Relatives gasped with the unholy delight of people who enjoy drama, provided it doesn't involve them. Agatha, heart racing, crouched to inspect the fallen structure. The cord hadn't frayed, it had been sliced, cleanly, deliberately. "Well," she muttered, "that's no accident." Bill Wong, who had arrived to collect some parish forms, approached. "What now?" he asked, surveying the mess. "Attempted murder by floristry," Agatha said. Bill knelt, frowning. "Cord's been cut. Kids playing about, maybe?" "Kids don't usually bring professional-grade scissors to church," Agatha said sharply. Serena stormed over. "This is sabotage. Someone wants to ruin my timetable." "Your timetable," Agatha repeated. "The bride was nearly flattened," Serena sniffed. "Symbolically only, and I will not tolerate symbolism." As the vicar attempted a calming prayer, Agatha drifted toward the vestry, where a sliver of movement caught her eye. She heard muffled voices, low, tense. She edged closer. "You promised," Beth hissed. Gavin's reply was sharp. "Keep quiet or we both lose everything." "Don't do this to me," Beth whispered. "You did it to yourself." Agatha's eyebrows shot up. She leaned forward, but a choir boy barged past, forcing her to step aside. By the time she regained her vantage, Gavin had exited the vestry with a casual grin. Beth emerged a few seconds later, eyes red, complexion chalky. Agatha intercepted her. "Are you all right?" Beth flinched. "Just rehearsal nerves." Agatha snorted. That was no pre-wedding flutter. Beth shook her head and hurried down the aisle, nearly tripping on a fallen rose. Serena resumed directing the group as though an assassination attempt hadn't occurred. "We continue. We must rehearse twice more," Polly sniffed. "Serena, maybe we should stop." "Nonsense," Serena replied. "Fear is the enemy of punctuality." Agatha joined Bill near the damaged arch. "This is connected to the cake business," she said. "Agatha," Bill sighed, "every inconvenience isn't a conspiracy." "This one is," she insisted. "The cord was sliced." Bill's expression darkened. "I'll have a quiet word with the caretaker, but officially it's an accident." "Officially," Agatha said, "your eyesight needs checking." During a final break, Polly fussed with her veil while Gavin charmed a cluster of bridesmaids. His charm was heavy-handed, too polished. They laughed, flustered. Agatha rolled her eyes. "Routine philanderer," she muttered. "Red herring, right there." She caught Gavin winking at yet another bridesmaid. Polly didn't see it, of course. Brides rarely do. Serena clapped once. "Last run-through," Agatha groaned. "She'll rehearse us into retirement." The final attempt proceeded without collapsing floral structures. Still, the atmosphere felt brittle. Beth kept her distance from Gavin with the precision of a woman avoiding a hot stove. Polly beamed with forced optimism. Howard Tranter paced about discussing deposit refunds should the church collapse. At last, rehearsal ended. Polly declared she needed tea. Gavin wanted whiskey. Serena wanted silence. No one got what they wanted. Bill approached Agatha on his way out. "Try not to meddle," he said gently. "Meddle? I'm observing." "That's what you always say before meddling." Agatha lifted her chin. "Someone sabotaged the arch. Someone wrote, 'Don't do it.' And someone's making Beth look like she's swallowed a hedgehog. That is not coincidence." Bill sighed. "Agatha." She cut him off. "You'll thank me later." As relatives streamed out, gossip rising like steam, Agatha lingered by the damaged support cord. She touched the sliced edge. The cut was too neat for clumsy vandalism. Someone with intent and access had done it. And the cupboard where those cords were stored? Beth had been sent there earlier to fetch candles. Clue delivered. Agatha straightened. Her mind ticked like a clock nudged into speed. Beth's trembling, Beth's refusal to stand beside Gavin, Beth's vestry argument, all threads of a story Agatha had not yet unravelled. Still, she wasn't ready to accuse, not yet. Half the village had motives she didn't understand, and the other half had secrets she hadn't uncovered. Driving back to Carsley, she muttered, "Drama queens, the lot of them." But her pulse thrummed with the excitement of a woman sniffing trouble. She parked outside her cottage and carried the mauve dress box inside. "Hodge," she announced, "you must fend for yourself on wedding day. I shall be busy preserving lives." Hodge inspected the box, then climbed directly inside it, pouring satin as if asserting dominance over mauve monstrosities. Agatha groaned. "Fine. Ruin it. At least one of us enjoys sabotage." Hodge curled up smugly, purring at his victory. It was, Agatha supposed, the most peaceful moment she would experience all week. "Hold still, Agatha. You're rustling like a paper bag," Serena hissed, fussing with the mauve satin as though it were an unruly child. "I am an unruly child," Agatha replied. "A child who wants a gin." But it was too early for gin, and Serena had no sense of humour. The wedding morning had arrived crisp and cold, the sky bright in a way Agatha found personally insulting. A dramatic cloudscape would have improved her photographs immeasurably. Carsley villagers packed the pews with territorial competitiveness. "Front rows for family," Doris Simpson whispered, elbowing a London aunt who had wandered too far forward. London relatives looked around with tight smiles, clearly wondering why the hymns were so old-fashioned and why the heating was so indifferent. Agatha processed down the aisle with the rigid posture of a woman balancing both dignity and uncomfortable undergarments. Every swish of satin echoed, reminding her she had allowed herself to be conscripted into this spectacle. Beth walked slightly behind, bouquet trembling in her hands. Agatha noted the tremor and filed it under mystery rather than cold. The ceremony began smoothly. Polly radiated fragile joy, glancing constantly at her parents, who sat in palpable relief. Gavin exuded the kind of confidence that suggested he believed the world existed to applaud him. His smile was wide, charming, and entirely hollow. Agatha smirked. "He'd grin like that at a parking meter if it flattered him," she whispered to Roy, who stood just behind the photographers. Roy whispered back, "He'd flirt with the meter too, darling." Vows exchanged, rings displayed, choir warbled, and before Agatha could complain about the draft under her hem, the couple were declared married. The crowd erupted into applause as though relieved the bride hadn't bolted. Outside the church, confetti flew with enthusiastic aim. Roy directed photographs with loud theatricality. "Chin up, lean in, pretend you adore him. No, Polly, not too much." Agatha stood stiffly. "If he tells me to smize, I'll hit him with my bouquet." Charles Fraith materialized at her elbow, smelling faintly of expensive soap and laziness. "Quite an event," he murmured. "Very nouveau riche. I'm taking bets on the marriage length." "Charles," Agatha muttered, "don't tempt fate. Something's off." "When is something not off around you?" he said with a grin. The reception at the Mercester Hotel was a study in excessive fuss. The top table sparkled under two bright chandeliers. Napkins had been folded into swans. The centerpieces looked like floral explosions, and Serena prowled the room like a general overseeing troop movements. Mr. Withers, who clearly should not have been invited, nursed a large drink. "Development like his destroys heritage," he told anyone who stood still long enough. When Gavin approached to shake his hand, Withers snapped, "Ruin our fields, will you?" Gavin brushed him off with a crude joke about progress and backward villagers. Leo Hart, Gavin's business partner, stalked in and out of the lobby taking calls, looking like a man being chased by creditors. Agatha reflexively distrusted anyone who used a mobile phone that much. Beth drifted toward the top table and began straightening glasses with nervous precision. "For the photographs," she murmured to Serena. "Yes, yes, branding," Serena replied, barely looking. Agatha, ever eagle-eyed, noticed Beth pause, then subtly swap two champagne flutes, rotating them so their labels faced outward. Small, seemingly pointless, but deliberate. Agatha mentally pinned the moment. Minutes later, she noticed Howard Tranter leaning closely toward Gavin. Their exchange was tight, clipped, ending with Gavin giving a smug half-smile that made Howard swallow hard. Howard hovered near the top table, twisting his signet ring nervously. Trouble brewed everywhere, and no one seemed sober enough to notice except Agatha, Soon the toasts began. Serena positioned Gavin like a product she was unveiling. Polly clung to his arm. Glasses rose across the room. Gavin lifted his flute theatrically, soaking in the attention. To love, success, and a glorious future. He drained the glass in one swallow, then froze. A strange, choking sound escaped him. His boastful grin collapsed. He clutched his throat, eyes bulging. Chairs scraped back. Polly screamed. Someone shouted, "His allergy! The nut allergy!" Staff panicked, rifling for his emergency injection. Gavin staggered, gasped once, then collapsed. The hotel fell into a frozen, terrible tableau. Polly knelt beside him, sobbing. Guests backed away in horror. Leo swore under his breath. Serena pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering "no, no, no," as if a ruined wedding was more shocking than a dying groom. Agatha alone remained very still, her mind racing not with fear but with cold calculation. Only Gavin had drunk from the glass Beth had adjusted. Complete chaos followed. The elegant reception hall, moments earlier smug with floral excess, now buzzed with screams and frantic footsteps. Someone wailed. Someone fainted. Someone else demanded a refund, which Agatha considered excessive even by Castley standards. Bill Wong arrived within minutes, having been summoned from a nearby errand. He crouched beside the paramedics. His face shifted from professional calm to weary dread, the look he reserved for situations that promised Agatha Raisin's involvement. He collapsed after drinking, Agatha supplied before Bill could ask. Glass raised for the toast, only his. Bill gave her a look. "Agatha, please don't get ahead of yourself." "I'm not ahead. Everyone else is behind," she retorted. Staff scurried around. "The injection! Where is it?" One waiter shouted, "His wife had it." Polly wailed, "I dropped the bag. I can't. Oh God, where is it?" Serena attempted to usher photographers away, a futile effort, as villagers had already begun breathlessly recounting events with embellishments. As Gavin was carried out, unconscious and turning ashen, Roy whispered to Agatha, "Darling, this is ghastly." Agatha nodded grimly, and suspicious. Charles ambled over, hands in pockets. "Wedding's gone downhill." Agatha rounded on him. "This isn't funny." "Nothing about weddings is funny," he replied, "which is why I avoid them." Howard Tranter slumped into a chair, face grey. Lydia Tranter sobbed into a napkin embroidered with the hotel logo. Polly, escorted away by Serena, alternated between hysterics and fury. Meanwhile, Mr. Withers sat in a corner muttering, "Should have expected trouble. Outsiders bring chaos." Agatha noted he'd had at least 3 drinks. A man with temper, motive, and access. Yet something about his bewildered face seemed too genuine for murder. Leo Hart, pacing, punched numbers into his phone. "You don't understand," he hissed to an unheard listener. "He can't die today. The investors just hold them off. Yes, hold them off." Another red herring, Agatha thought. In her experience, desperate men rarely had time for complicated homicides. While Bill took statements, Agatha hovered near the top table. The champagne flutes glinted under the chandelier. She touched Gavin's abandoned glass. Sticky residue clung to the rim. "Don't touch that," Bill warned sharply. "I touched it delicately," Agatha replied. "There's a difference." Bill sighed. "Let us handle this." "You? Handle it? Bill, you think this was an accident." "It might be." "It wasn't." "Agatha." "It wasn't." Beth appeared suddenly at Agatha's elbow, pale as bone. Will he? Agatha studied her. "What do you think, Beth?" Beth shook her head, trembling. I only wanted the photographs to look nice." "Did you?" Agatha said quietly. Beth burst into tears and fled, bouquet petals scattering behind her like breadcrumbs. Agatha watched her go, unease hardening. That wasn't guilt, at least not the guilty of murder. It was something murkier, a trapped animal fear. Meanwhile, Serena had taken control of the milling guests with frightening competence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "the reception is temporarily adjourned. Please remain calm and await police instructions." Her voice quivered on the last word, not with grief, but with outrage that her perfect event had been ruined. Agatha pulled Charles aside. Beth moved his glass. "I saw it." Charles frowned. Why would she want to poison him? Agatha lowered her voice. "I don't know. Yet." "And you're already hunting killers," he said. "Must be a Thursday." The room's noise dulled as shock settled. Guests whispered, speculating wildly. Nut allergy, some said. Sabotage, others insisted. Family drama, one whispered, sounding far too thrilled. Bill returned. Agatha, go home, please. Are you banning me? Yes. She adjusted her hair defiantly. You'll need me later. I hope not. But Agatha knew weddings, especially grand ones, always hid rotten layers. Gavin Rich, swaggering bridegroom, had just peeled back a very dangerous one. She left the hotel, steps quickening with the thrill she refused to name. A groom collapsing mid-toast wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. Someone had acted with intent, and she intended to find out why. At home, she shucked off her shoes and closed the door behind her. As if sensing drama, Hodge padded over, tail flicking. Well, Agatha said, that was a wedding, briefly. Hodge leapt onto a chair, turned twice, and settled with regal indifference. Agatha exhaled, rubbing her temples. Trouble had marched into Mercester wearing a morning suit, and she was already halfway to unpicking its seams. This is ridiculous, Agatha announced, hands on hips, surveying the once cheerful hotel lounge now transformed into a holding pen for shell-shocked wedding guests. You'd think a royal had died, not a property developer with bad hair. No one laughed. Guests clustered in uneasy clumps, clutching untouched drinks as if they were fragile relics. The babble of speculation rose and fell like messy waves. The staff drifted helplessly between clusters, murmuring apologies that soothed no one. Serena Blake, brittle as snapped spaghetti, darted around proclaiming it was a tragic medical event to anyone who stood still long enough. She repeated the phrase so often it began to sound like a slogan she hoped would absolve her of responsibility. Bill Wong arrived in full professional mode, all cool concentration. His usual calm warmth had been replaced by clipped efficiency. He moved through the room, questioning staff about the menu, ingredients, and emergency procedures. I told you, the chef repeated, waving a clipboard dangerously close to Bill's face. Everything was nut-free. Not a crumb, not a drop, nothing. I double-checked myself. Bill raised a patient brow. And the champagne? The chef flushed. Bottled, sealed, untouched. It's not like nuts sneak in through the cork. Agatha prowled the periphery, absorbing every murmur. She had perfected the art of lurking without appearing to lurk. Leo Hart, the business partner, stood by the bar muttering about disastrous timing and investors breathing down his neck. His agitation was electric, hands fidgeting, tie askew. Polly had been escorted to a small sitting room just off the lobby. Through the open doorway, Agatha glimpsed her sitting motionless, shock settling around her like frost. Lydia hovered, fluttering and fussing, offering tea, smelling salts, and unwanted commentary. Howard Tranter loitered nearby, touched by grief but somehow calculating, his fingers worrying at his cufflinks. He caught the hotel manager's sleeve. The insurance clauses, he whispered desperately. We reviewed them last week. There's coverage for, well, for unforeseen tragedy. Agatha rolled her eyes. A man collapses and everyone becomes an accountant. Clues began slipping through the chaos. A junior chef approached Bill shyly. Sir, I saw someone in the kitchen before the toast. A lady I didn't recognize. Tall, elegant. I assumed she belonged. Describe her, Bill said. Well-dressed, dark hair, confident. She didn't touch anything, I think. Serena appeared instantly beaming. That was me. I was checking plating. Agatha snorted. You? Checking plating? You run events, not kitchens. Serena's smile tightened. I multitask. Bill made a note. Anyone else see anything unusual near the champagne? No, the staff chorused. Still, the kitchen contained no trace of nuts. Not oil, not powder, not residue. It's clean, Bill told Agatha later, brow furrowed. Absolutely clean. Agatha tapped her foot. Then someone must have doctored the champagne itself. The tests? Bill hesitated. Early indications suggest nut oil, strong dose, enough to cause a violent reaction. Agatha's pulse quickened. Someone wanted him dead. Or someone was careless. You don't believe that any more than I do. Across the lounge, red herrings strutted about shamelessly. Serena's tense whispers with Gavin earlier now took on a sinister edge. She had been demanding overdue payments. Leo had been seen shredding papers in a tiny hotel office barely an hour before the collapse. And Mr. Withers, half drunk, kept muttering to a cousin, I said I'd stop him. one way or another. Each potential suspect looked messier than the last. While Bill questioned witnesses, Agatha circled behind Leo, who tossed a crumpled paper into a bin. She waited precisely 3 seconds, then sauntered over and retrieved it. Insurance valuation, Cotswold site, it read, torn along the edge. Interesting. She slipped it discreetly into her handbag. Leo hardly noticed. He was too busy arguing into a phone. They'll blame me for delays. No, listen, he shouldn't be out of commission today. Bill returned to Agatha's side. I'll escort Polly home soon. She's in shock. Don't interfere. Bill, Agatha replied sweetly, interfering is how things get solved. Eventually, the hotel staff began ushering guests out through side doors. The evening had unravelled into something cold, strange, and unforgettable. Agatha stepped outside where Charles waited by his battered convertible. Well, he drawled, opening the passenger door, you take me to the nicest events. It's not over, Agatha said, sliding in. This stinks. Everything stinks when murder's involved. Who said murder? You did, just not out loud. Charles drove through the dark lanes toward Carsley, headlights slicing through hedgerow shadows. Agatha stared ahead, mind ticking. He knew people hated him, she murmured. A man like that doesn't need allergies, he needs a bodyguard. Charles chuckled. If he hired one, he'd probably seduce them. Charles, please. Serious thoughts only. My thoughts are always serious. They simply sound lazy. Agatha ignored him. Serena sneaking into the kitchen, Leo shredding documents, Withers muttering threats, and Beth fiddling with the glasses. What about Beth? Charles asked. She swapped 2 flutes earlier. I saw her. Why? Symmetry. Please. Only psychopaths care about symmetry. Charles laughed. So, everyone's suspicious except you. Correct, Agatha said with modest pride. When they reached Carsley, Charles pulled up outside Agatha's cottage. Try not to storm a suspect's house tonight, he said lightly. No promises. You're incorrigible. And you're decorative, Agatha replied, climbing out. Once inside, she kicked off her shoes and headed straight to the kitchen. The house felt oddly quiet after the chaos of the hotel. She flicked on the kettle partly for comfort, partly because any mystery worth solving required tea. Before she could pour, Hodge padded in, tail lifted in imperious greeting. He sniffed her dress, recoiled, then glared. Oh, don't judge me, Agatha muttered. I didn't kill him. I simply witnessed the drama. The telephone rang. She snatched it up. Bill's weary voice filled her ear. Agatha, for the love of all things sensible, leave this alone. It's early days. Officially, we can't call it murder yet. Accidentally ingesting a lethal dose of nut oil. There are ways. No, Bill, someone meant business. Agatha. Good night, Bill. She hung up without waiting for his reply. If she listened too long, he'd ruin her momentum with reason and procedure. Agatha settled at her kitchen table, tapping the purloined scrap from Leo's rubbish. Insurance valuation, she murmured. What were you hiding, Leo? Her mind churned. A partner under strain, a development project many despised, a planner owed money, a bride desperate for security, a groom too arrogant to fear enemies. It was a buffet of motives. A faint scratching sound distracted her. Hodge was pawing at the mauve bridesmaid dress draped over a chair. The cat's expression suggested deep personal offence. Yes, I know it's hideous, Agatha sighed, but murder at a wedding? That's worse. She had half a mind to march back to the hotel and demand access to the champagne bottles, but fatigue tugged at her. Even Agatha Raisin needed to recharge before launching into battle. Still, her thoughts refused to settle. The junior chef seeing Serena in the kitchen, Leo shredding paperwork, Mr. Withers threatening Gavin, Beth quietly swapping glasses behind Serena's back. And the test results? Nut oil. Deliberate. No one, she said aloud, just happens to die at a wedding I've spent this much money on. The kettle clicked off. Steam drifted softly. Hodge hopped onto a neighbouring chair, curling with a self-satisfied thump. His slow blinking suggested he found her fretting unnecessary, as cats so often do. Agatha sipped her tea, letting the warmth anchor her as her mind built theories faster than she could dismiss them. Tomorrow, she would chase answers. She would pry into motives, interrogate half the county, and irritate Bill to the brink of resignation. But tonight, she let the kitchen's quiet settle around her. The tea warmed her fingers. Hodge's steady breathing softened the sharp edges of the day. Agatha Raisin, indefatigable investigator, allowed herself a single moment of stillness. Then, with a spark of triumph, she whispered, "Someone slipped him that oil, and I'll find who." Hodge flicked his ear, unimpressed, and resumed sleeping. Beth still hadn't been located, Doris Simpson announced, breathless with the relish of a woman delivering breaking news. "Vanished. Like smoke." Agatha nearly dropped her scone. "Vanished how? People don't vanish in Castley. They hide badly." Doris leaned closer. "So it's confirmed," Doris went on. "She left the Tranter house at dawn with a suitcase. Left a note saying she needs space. Space at a time like this." Castley, already vibrating with wedding gossip, seized new fuel eagerly. By breakfast, Gavin Rich's collapse had become 6 tragedies, 3 affairs, and 1 supernatural omen involving owls. By mid-morning, the village grapevine spun so fast it threatened to ignite. At the vicarage coffee morning, Mrs. Bloxby calmly poured tea as if the world weren't collapsing. "We must be careful," she said gently. "It's unkind to decide too quickly what God hasn't yet revealed." Agatha snorted. "God may be patient, but I'm not. Beth running off is as good as a confession." "Or fear," Mrs. Bloxby murmured. "Sometimes fear looks like guilt." Polly arrived, face blotchy, eyes swollen. Lydia hovered behind her, wringing her hands like damp laundry. Howard followed last, stiff and distracted. "She left us," Polly said tremulously, accepting a tissue. "Ran away the morning after my wedding collapsed. How could she be so selfish?" Agatha folded her arms. "Maybe she's hiding something." Howard flinched at that, a small, telling movement. "Beth wrote that she cannot face anyone," Lydia said, voice cracking. "She's frightened. We must be kind." Agatha raised a brow. "I'm always kind, strategically." Howard cleared his throat. We shouldn't speculate." But he looked more worried about whatever Beth might say to police than about her well-being. Agatha felt suspicion bloom. If Beth were innocent, why run? And if she weren't, why run now? When Agatha suggested searching Beth's room, Lydia hesitated. "It feels intrusive," Agatha pushed forward. "Nonsense, we're helping," Mrs. Bloxby added gently. "Perhaps a pastoral search would comfort everyone." Lydia, overwhelmed, surrendered. "Very well, but don't judge her." Beth's bedroom was small, tidy, and desperately ordinary. Pastel duvet, neat bookshelves, a timid vase of wilting daisies. Agatha prowled with the solemnity of a bloodhound. Mrs. Bloxby, more respectful, trailed behind. Agatha opened the bedside drawer and froze. "Well now," she breathed. Inside lay a stack of magazine pages torn into careful rectangles, articles about anaphylaxis, nut allergies, immune responses. Beneath them, a library book titled Managing Severe Allergic Reactions, its corners softened by use. Receipts from the Mercester chemist peeked out. Antihistamines, inhalers, medicated wipes. Mrs. Bloxby looked troubled. She might have been researching for someone else. "Or planning something for Gavin," Agatha countered. "Knowledge is power, and poison." Then, tucked in a small box, Agatha found the photograph. Beth and Gavin seated close together in a dim London bar, his arm around her waist, her fingers resting on his knee, their faces too intimate, too familiar for innocence. Agatha hissed triumphantly. She lied. They had something. This is motive, means, and stupidity in one photograph. Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "Or it is heartbreak. Old heartbreak can make people hide things." Agatha scoffed. "Heartbreak doesn't kill a man with nut oil." She pocketed the photograph before Mrs. Bloxby could protest. The pastor's wife frowned. "Agatha, perhaps we should leave that here." "No," Agatha said. "Evidence must be protected from anxious mothers who might accidentally burn it." They found Beth's note on the desk. "I need space. I cannot face anyone. Please don't look for me yet." Mrs. Bloxby touched the paper with regret. "Poor girl." "Poor girl, nothing," Agatha retorted. "Running never looks good. Ask any criminal." As they left the room, Lydia intercepted them. "Did you find anything?" Agatha plastered on a sympathetic smile. "Just signs she was overwhelmed. Nothing sinister." Mrs. Bloxby shot her a reproachful glance. Agatha ignored it. She wasn't here to soothe feelings. She was here to solve murder. Back in the village, gossip intensified. Mrs. Mason declared Beth a scheming hussy. Mr. Jessup insisted Beth had the look of a runaway bride. Mrs. Timpson opined that Beth had probably joined a cult in Cheltenham. Agatha basked in the chaos. If she isn't guilty, she's definitely dramatic. Roy rang mid-afternoon, bustling London noise behind him. Aggie, you won't believe it. The company Gavin ran is basically a collapsing souffle. Investors pulling out, debts everywhere. Agatha felt a spark. So the rich groom wasn't rich. More pyramid than empire, darling. Interesting, Agatha murmured. Very interesting. Roy continued. Rumour says he needed that Tranter connection badly. Polly's family money kept him afloat. So marriage as financial flotation device, Agatha said. Classic, Roy hummed. And tragic, but mostly classic. As evening settled, Agatha invited Mrs. Bloxby for tea to soothe the woman's evident worry. Hodge immediately claimed Mrs. Bloxby's lap, purring proprietorially. Beth's disappearance troubles me, Mrs. Bloxby admitted softly. Running away doesn't always mean guilt. Sometimes it means shame or fear. Agatha poured tea briskly. Fear of arrest, perhaps. Fear of hurting someone she loves, Mrs. Bloxby countered. Agatha frowned. You're too kind. It clouds your judgment. Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. And you are too sharp. It clouds yours. Agatha bristled, but only for a moment. Something in that remark pricked deeper than expected. Still, she straightened her shoulders. Beth is suspect number one until I find someone guiltier. That's just logic. Mrs. Bloxby stroked Hodge's head. Logic can be correct, yet unkind. I'm not here to be kind, Agatha snapped. That, Mrs. Bloxby said softly, is precisely why you must be careful. Agatha looked away, annoyed by the flicker of sympathy she refused to acknowledge. The evidence pointed at Beth. The photograph, the research, the disappearance. It painted a neat, damning picture. Too neat, perhaps. But Agatha Raisin was not a woman to let softness undermine her certainty. She would follow the clues, even if they led somewhere she didn't expect. The following morning, Carsley's rumour mill reached dangerous speeds. Someone claimed Beth had boarded a train to London. Someone else swore she'd been seen in Morton buying travel-sized toiletries. Mrs. Timpson suggested elopement. Mrs. Mason suggested guilt. Agatha marched through the village like an officer inspecting troops. Has anyone seen her? She demanded of each passer-by. Vanished, said Mr. Bartlett. Slipped away, said Mrs. Jessup. Clearly guilty, said Mrs. Mason. Agatha sniffed. Clearly cowardly, more like. She headed straight to the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby greeted her with a worried smile. I fear the village is sharpening its claws. Good, Agatha replied. Claws find things faster than prayer. Mrs. Bloxby ignored the barb. Howard came by earlier. He's frantic. He thinks Beth might speak to police about private matters. Meaning Gavin's secrets? Agatha asked. I suspect so. Secrets, Agatha said brightly. My favourite word. Determined to test the Tranter parents further, Agatha returned to their house. Lydia opened the door with the strained smile of a woman propped up by tea and denial. Oh, Mrs. Raisin, she said, voice trembling. We haven't heard from her, not a word. Howard appeared behind her, eyes darting. If she contacts anyone, let us know immediately. Agatha studied him. Fear of what she'll say is stronger than fear for her safety, isn't it? Howard stiffened. That's absurd. Is it? He looked away. She's fragile, that's all. Agatha didn't believe him. She returned to Beth's room alone, coaxing Lydia into making tea downstairs. Agatha scanned again, not the drawer this time, but the tiny details she'd ignored. A calendar with 2 dates circled, a receipt for train fare from 2 weeks prior, a pressed flower tucked inside a book, one of the flowers used at the wedding. Agatha muttered. Sentimental evidence, useless. But the photograph burned in her handbag. Beth and Gavin were more than acquaintances, and Beth's behaviour, fearful, jittery, evasive, suggested pressure from Gavin before his death. Back home, Roy rang again. Aggie, more news. Rumours say Gavin promised investors unrealistic returns, major shortfall expected. So he wasn't just financially unstable, Agatha said. He was desperate. Roy sighed theatrically. My darling, desperation breeds enemies. And enemies breed murder, Agatha concluded. As evening descended, she found herself pacing her living room while Hodge supervised from the sofa. The kettle hissed in the background. A knock at the door startled her. Mrs. Blocksby entered, face thoughtful. "I've been considering Beth's disappearance," she said. "We saw signs of research, yes, and the photograph. But research can be done for someone else, and photographs can hold regret rather than guilt." Agatha folded her arms. "You're defending her." "I'm understanding her," Mrs. Blocksby corrected gently. "Beth lives in fear. That much is clear." "Fear of what? Exposure?" "Fear of consequences, not always her own." Agatha sat heavily. "You think she's innocent?" Mrs. Blocksby hesitated. "I think she's overwhelmed. She loved Gavin once, perhaps longer than she should have, and now he's dead. Running may be her way of avoiding pain rather than avoiding justice." Agatha bristled, though not from anger. Something softer, annoyingly softer, tugged at her. She hated when Mrs. Blocksby's wisdom seeped past her defences. Still, she rose. "Sympathy is charming, but murder isn't solved with warm feelings. Beth fled. People flee for reasons." Mrs. Blocksby nodded. "Yes, but I recall another woman who once fled London for Casserly." Agatha stiffened. "That was different." Mrs. Blocksby's smile was warm. "Is it?" Before Agatha could respond, Hodge jumped from the sofa, stretched luxuriantly, and trotted to his food bowl with imperious expectation. Mrs. Blocksby laughed softly. "He believes you need a distraction." "Hodge believes everyone lives to serve him," Agatha said. But the distraction worked. Her irritation dimmed. Mrs. Blocksby rose to leave. "Think kindly of Beth tonight, just a little. It may help you see what's truly there." Agatha escorted her to the door, lips pressed in reluctant acceptance. When the cottage fell quiet again, Agatha pulled out the photograph and stared at it. Gavin's smug grin. Beth's wistful smile. 2 lives entwined in a way Beth had certainly wished forgotten. "Suspect number 1, Agatha muttered, "until someone proves guiltier." She filed the photograph away, set the kettle to boil again, and watched Hodge bat lazily at a stray ribbon from her mauve dress. Domestic peace settled around her, familiar and steady. But Agatha Raisin's mind, sharp, restless, and hungry, refused peace. Not until she found Beth, and not until she knew why the bridesmaid had vanished. "That banner wasn't a prank," Agatha declared, sweeping into Charles's convertible with the righteous purpose of a woman who had already solved the murder in her head and simply needed the evidence to cooperate. It was a warning. You don't scrawl "don't do it" across a hen night decoration unless you mean business. Charles buckled his seatbelt with theatrical patience. "Most hens mean business, Aggie. Usually something involving too much Prosecco and an inflatable accessory." "Don't be vulgar," Agatha snapped. "Drive, we're interrogating a florist." Charles blinked. "Is that legal?" "Probably," she said. "But even if it isn't, we're doing it." Mr. Partridge's florist shop in Mercester was overheated, humid, and filled with slightly defeated roses. Agatha stepped inside and immediately began sweating under her coat. "Good grief," she muttered. "Is it Tropical Tuesday?" Mr. Partridge himself was thin, fussy, and possessed the demeanour of a man permanently disappointed by customers, flowers, and life. He looked up as Agatha entered. "If you're returning those carnations," he said without greeting, "they were fresh this morning." "I'm not here for refunds," Agatha said briskly. "I'm here for answers." Charles leaned against a rack of wilted lilies with lazy amusement. "Brace yourself, old boy." Agatha planted herself at the counter. "You supplied the flowers for Polly Tranter's hen night and the wedding." "Correct," Mr. Partridge sniffed. "Or rather, I attempted to. The bridegroom preferred supermarket bouquets. Disgraceful practice. Undercuts local trade. I told him so." "Did you indeed?" Agatha said, leaning forward. "I also told him," the florist continued, "that disrespect has consequences. You treat professionals like dirt. One way or another you get what's coming." Agatha's eyebrows shot upward. It wasn't a confession, but it certainly had the right theatrical menace. "And what exactly did he have coming?" she pressed. "Ruin," Mr. Partridge replied simply. "Men like him always fall. It's nature's way." Charles raised a brow. "Poetic." "True," the florist snapped. Agatha noticed beside the till a display of thick black marker pens, not the ordinary type, but heavy-duty florist markers used for writing on plastic labels and waterproof banners. She reached for one. "Do you mind?" she asked rhetorically, already uncapping it. A strong chemical tang filled the air. Agatha inhaled sharply. "This is the same scent as the ink on the wedding banner." Mr. Partridge stiffened. Anyone could have bought those. They're standard florist supplies. "Did anyone borrow one?" Agatha demanded. Mr. Partridge hesitated. "Ask the girl." The girl, the young assistant with nervous hands and a swooping fringe, stepped forward. Yes, someone did borrow a marker. It was one of the bridesmaids. She rushed in saying she needed to fix a decoration emergency." Agatha's heart quickened. "Which bridesmaid?" I can't remember," the girl stammered. "It was the day before the hen night. She wore mauve, but they all wore mauve, didn't they?" Agatha exhaled in irritation. Was she tall, short, plump, thin, miserable, giggly? Did she look like she'd commit murder or cry if spoken to harshly? The girl blinked. "She looked like a bridesmaid." Charles muffled a laugh. "It might have been the quiet one," the assistant added uncertainly, "or the giddy London friend. They were both in here that afternoon." Agatha pounced. "Quiet one meaning Beth?" "Maybe," the girl whispered. "I'm sorry, I'm not good with faces." Agatha drummed her fingers on the counter. The clue fit, perhaps too neatly. Beth, already drenched in suspicion, borrowing a marker that matched the threatening banner. Yet something felt performative rather than sinister. "Tell me this," Agatha said sharply. "Did Mr. Partridge like Gavin Rich?" The girl looked stricken. Mr. Partridge answered first. "Disliked him intensely. He had no respect for craftsmanship or local business. The world is full of such men. It's tragic, but not surprising, that he's dead." Agatha froze. "You know he's dead?" "It's on everyone's lips," the florist said. "Hardly privileged information." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "You don't seem shocked." "Shock," Mr. Partridge replied, rearranging a drooping bouquet, "is wasted on the predictable." A tantalizing remark, yet Agatha felt him slipping out of the suspect pool. His resentment felt genuine, but unaccompanied by opportunity. She spotted his appointment book and leaned over the counter, craning to see the entries. "Did you have orders from the bridal party the night before the hen?" Mr. Partridge barked. "Madam, that is confidential." Agatha tried to lean closer, misjudged the distance, and elbowed a bucket of carnations. Water cascaded over her tights. She shrieked in indignation. Charles clapped a hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking. Agatha seized a fistful of soggy hem. "I am drenched. These tights cost. Never mind, I'm leaving, but this isn't over." She stormed out, tights squelching, dignity evaporated. Outside, bright, blustery air hit her face. Charles followed, still amused. "Would you like the car heated, or shall I ring you out first?" "Oh, shut up," Agatha snapped. They climbed into the convertible, and Agatha began sorting the evidence aloud. The banner wasn't a stranger's joke. Someone from within the party wrote it. Someone who knew what Polly was marrying. "Meaning?" Charles asked. "Meaning Beth," Agatha said grimly. Her pale face, shaking hands, and now the florist's assistant saw someone who could easily have been her. Charles nodded thoughtfully. "A private warning, perhaps." "Exactly," Agatha replied. "A warning that was ignored." Charles started the engine. "So, Beth writes a threatening message, sabotages the decorations, researches nut allergies, and flees the village. She's looking guiltier by the minute." Agatha glared. "Don't summarize things I'm already thinking. It's rude," he smirked. "Just checking the logic." "My logic doesn't need checking," Agatha growled. She stared through the windscreen, replaying every detail. The banner, the photograph, the research, the vanishing act. It formed a convincing narrative. Too convincing, perhaps. Agatha distrusted tidy stories. They usually meant someone was cleaning up the mess deliberately. "Turn left," she commanded. "We're going home?" "No. Coffee shop. I need something civilized." At the Mercester Cafe, they took a small table near the window. Agatha peeled off her damp tights in the loo and returned with bare legs and icy dignity. Charles raised a brow. Brave choice. "Comfort over modesty," Agatha said. "I am a modern woman." She nursed a cappuccino while Charles sipped tea. "Listen," she said, tapping the table. "The banner smelled of florist ink. The florist uses that exact brand. A bridesmaid borrowed a marker. That can't be coincidence." "Or it is," Charles said lightly. Don't antagonize me, Agatha warned. Charles leaned back. Aggie, think. If Beth wanted to kill him, why warn Polly? Why write anything at all? Agatha hesitated. Guilt? Or love, Charles said softly. Warnings often come from people who care. Agatha hated when he was unexpectedly insightful. It interfered with her certainty. But she ran, Agatha insisted. Running screams guilt. It can also scream fear, Charles said. You've run before. She froze. I did not run. I relocated. Charles smiled gently. Of course. She refused to engage. Instead, she rummaged in her handbag and pulled out the photograph of Beth and Gavin. This says everything. It says they were close once, Charles corrected. It doesn't say she wanted him dead. Agatha shot him a dark look. Why are you always defending the weakest suspect? Because they're usually innocent, he replied. You know that. She huffed noisily, but the certainty in her mind wobbled. They finished their drinks and Charles drove her back to Carsley. The wind had picked up, tugging at hedgerows and swirling leaves along the verges. Agatha stepped out of the car, clutching her bag and dignity. Will you be all right? Charles asked. I'm always all right, she replied, too sharply. Charles drove away, leaving Agatha standing before her cottage, the weight of the investigation pressing harder than expected. Inside, Hodge greeted her with offended grandeur, clearly displeased at her prolonged absence. You'll never guess what happened, Agatha announced, hanging her coat. I interrogated a florist. He hated Gavin enough to recite poetry about his downfall, and I ruined my tights. Hodge blinked, unimpressed. Agatha moved to the kitchen, set the kettle boiling and spread her clues across the table. The photo, the receipts, the scrap mentioning insurance, her notes on the banner. One pattern emerged with stubborn clarity. Someone close to the wedding had warned Polly. Someone inside the party. Agatha tapped the photograph. Beth, darling, what were you trying to say? She remembered Beth's trembling hands at the rehearsal, her urgent insistence on standing at the edge of the bridesmaids' line, her refusal to look at Gavin, her silent distress, a thought whispered at the edge of Agatha's mind. Not guilt, not anger, but dread. What if she wasn't warning Polly about the marriage, Agatha murmured. What if she was warning Gavin? The possibility startled her. She sat upright. Warnings aren't always threats. Sometimes they're desperate pleas. She paced the kitchen, restless. Beth knew something, she muttered. Something dangerous. Something that terrified her. She sank into a chair. Hodge leapt onto the table, planting himself on her notes. Oh, move, she said half-heartedly, scratching behind his ears. The kettle clicked off with a soft sigh. Hodge stretched luxuriously, tail flicking. Agatha poured tea and stared at the evidence again. Her certainty about Beth's guilt had melted into something embarrassing, doubt. Fine, she conceded aloud. Maybe she's not a murderer. Maybe she's a coward, or a victim, or both. Hodge purred as if pleased by her humility. Agatha sipped her tea slowly. The warmth settled her mind, though the puzzle remained sharp. One thing was now clear. She needed to find Beth, not to accuse her, but to understand her. Because guilt was tidy, fear was messy, and Agatha Raisin, though she hated to admit it, had begun to suspect she was dealing with the latter. You're holding your teaspoon like a weapon, Bill observed mildly. Agatha tightened her grip. That's because I'm restraining myself from hurling it at you. Stop calling it a tragic accident. Bill sat across her kitchen table, shoulders stiff with fatigue. His tea cooled untouched. Early tests suggest traces of nut oil in Gavin's champagne glass, he said. Only his glass. The bottle wasn't kept. Serena insisted on replacing it before anyone thought to save it. Though the bottle was gone, residue remained in Gavin's glass. Agatha let out an outraged noise. A bottle central to a murder inquiry thrown out because someone wanted to tidy? We're living among incompetents. Bill's mouth twitched. Officially, the working theory is a lapse on Gavin's part. Unofficially, yes? Agatha leaned forward. Unofficially, Bill conceded. Someone could have spiked his drink easily during the reception chaos. But please don't repeat that. Agatha smugly sipped her tea. Then we're agreed. Murder. We're not agreed, Bill corrected. You said... I said it's possible, not that it's likely. Well, I say it's murder, Agatha declared. And I'm always right eventually. Bill sighed with long-suffering affection. Aggie, promise you won't run off into danger. No, she replied instantly. He rubbed his temples. Just be careful. I'm always careful. That, Bill muttered, is demonstrably untrue. Bill left moments later, still insisting she keep out of trouble. Agatha waited until he was safely out of sight before shouting up the stairs, "Charles, get dressed, we're going sleuthing." Charles descended at an elegant dawdle. I was dressed. I was reclining. Big difference. "Come on," Agatha snapped. "We're returning to the hotel. I want to walk the crime scene again." The Mercester Hotel reception staff recognized her immediately and wilted. Agatha breezed past them as though she owned the establishment. She commandeered a table in the lounge and ordered coffee for herself, tea for Charles. "We're here to find inconsistencies," Agatha murmured. "There must be something I missed." The weary barman drifted past, looking half asleep and wholly disillusioned. Agatha pounced. "You were on duty the night of the wedding, weren't you?" He blinked. "Unfortunately, yes." "You saw everything?" "Unfortunately, yes." Agatha leaned forward conspiratorially. "You must have noticed something helpful." He hesitated, then sighed. "I remember seeing Beth, hovering near the kitchen door when dessert was being plated." Agatha's pulse quickened. "Doing what?" "Talking to Gavin," he said. "Low voices. Urgent. I only caught bits." "What bits?" Agatha pressed. "Well, something like, 'You can't expect me to stand beside you like nothing happened.' And then Gavin said something like, 'If your wife finds out, I lose everything.' At the time, I assumed they meant Polly." Agatha sat back, triumphant. Their affair was real. Charles frowned. "Or something else entirely. It may not mean betrayal." Agatha ignored him. "Did they touch, argue, exchange envelopes?" The barman shook his head. "Just tension. She looked shaken. He looked annoyed." "Annoyed," Agatha repeated. "Perfect motive." Charles said gently, "Aggie, motives are plentiful. Means are another matter." She waved him off. "I have both." But Bill later disproved one promising thread. Leo, the perpetually anxious business partner, had left a mysterious envelope beside Gavin's plate before the toast. Agatha had built a brilliant theory around it. When Bill rang her from the police station, she snatched the phone up eagerly. "It was blackmail material, wasn't it?" "No," Bill said flatly. "It was revised development projections. Spreadsheets. Nothing incriminating. Utterly dull." Agatha groaned. "So Leo's not a murderer, just tedious?" "That's the working theory," Bill replied. Still, Gavin's world bristled with resentments. Someone had wanted to warn him. Someone else had wanted him dead. The connections tangled and coiled like stubborn brambles. Later that afternoon, Charles drove Agatha back toward Castley. Dusk had begun nibbling at the edges of the lanes, turning the hedgerows shadowy and tall. "Slow down," Agatha snapped suddenly. "There's someone waving." A figure stood ahead, slightly hunched, arms signalling desperately. As the car rolled closer, Agatha's breath caught. Beth. She looked spectral, exhausted, cheeks streaked, hair unkempt, clothes crumpled. Her hands were red from cold. Agatha leapt out of the car. "Beth, where on earth—" "Please," Beth whispered hoarsely. "Please don't shout." Agatha lowered her voice, startled by the rawness in the young woman's eyes. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Running from the police?" "No," Beth said again, but the tremor in her voice contradicted her. Charles approached quietly. "Shall we take you home?" Beth shook her head rapidly. "No, I can't go home yet. I can't." Her breath hitched. She pressed a hand to her mouth, steadying herself. "Why stop us then?" Agatha asked, softer than usual. Beth swallowed hard. "Because I need to explain before I turn myself in." Agatha's heart hammered, not entirely from excitement, though excitement was certainly present. "Turn yourself in for what?" Beth closed her eyes. "Please, not here, not where anyone might see." Agatha bit back 10 questions. "Then where?" Beth hesitated, shivering. "There's a lay-by outside Mercester. Quiet. Please meet me there. Half an hour. I need to say everything properly." Agatha studied her, the quivering mouth, the haunted eyes, the weight that seemed to bow her shoulders. Not the look of a murderer, but certainly the look of someone carrying something unbearable. "All right," Agatha said gently. "Half an hour." Beth nodded gratefully, then hurried off into the gloom, vanishing down a narrow footpath that led toward the old canal. Agatha returned to the car in silence. Charles watched her thoughtfully. Well, that was dramatic. She's frightened, Agatha murmured. Of being arrested? Of something, Agatha said, staring out the windscreen, and fear is messier than guilt. They drove back toward Mercester in near silence, headlights carving thin tunnels through the growing dark. Agatha tapped her fingers against her knee, energy jittering through her like static. Charles finally ventured, "Are you sure this is wise, meeting a trembling suspect in a dark lay-by?" "Yes," Agatha said. "That wasn't the question." "I'm meeting her because she asked me," Agatha insisted. Charles's voice gentled. "She asked because she trusts you, not because she intends to confess murder." Agatha's throat tightened unexpectedly. She sniffed. "Sentimentality doesn't suit you." "It doesn't suit you either," he said kindly. They reached the lay-by, a quiet gravel pull-off overlooking a hedgerow and a lopsided wooden fence. The faintest stars pricked through the darkening sky. Agatha parked, exhaled, and tried to steady herself. She wasn't often nervous before interviews, but this felt different. The weight in Beth's eyes had struck a dissonant chord. Charles cleared his throat. "I'll stay if you want moral support." "I don't need moral support," Agatha insisted. "Then I'll stay for entertainment." Agatha shoved him lightly. "Go home. I need to do this alone." Charles hesitated. "All right, but ring me afterward, immediately." "Fine. And if Beth turns out to be unhinged, she won't." "She might." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Charles, go." He left reluctantly, giving her one last worried look before his taillights disappeared down the lane. The lay-by fell quiet again. Agatha sat in her car, hands wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. She lit a cigarette, a rare break from her own rules, purely as punctuation, not habit. The ember glowed, soft and unhurried in the gloom. Minutes stretched. Agatha replayed the barman's words. "You can't expect me to stand beside you like nothing happened. If your wife finds out, I lose everything." They rang differently now. If Beth had been the woman Gavin once courted, using her, discarding her, expecting silence, that changed things. Betrayal could motivate warning, but could it motivate murder? Footsteps approached. Agatha flicked the cigarette out the window and stepped out of the car. Beth emerged from the hedge-lined path, looking even smaller than before. Her coat was too thin, her expression hollow. "You came," Beth whispered. "You asked," Agatha replied gently. "Start wherever you need to." Beth wrapped her arms around herself. "I told you earlier, I didn't kill Gavin, I swear it." Agatha nodded slowly. "All right. Tell me the rest." Beth stared at the gravel. "I knew him, before Polly. We were involved. I thought he cared for me. He didn't." Agatha's jaw tightened. "He used you." "Yes," Beth whispered. "And when he ended it, he told me never to speak of us, that it would complicate business. He said Polly's family was important." Agatha felt a flicker of the pity she hated. "And the banner? Did you write it?" Beth shook her head violently. "I found the marker in my pocket afterward, the one from the florist. I borrowed it to fix a crooked ribbon. I didn't mean the words as a threat. I meant them as a warning." Agatha blinked. That was inconvenient. Beth continued. "The research you found, the allergy articles, I wasn't planning anything. I was protecting him." Agatha stared. "Protecting?" "I knew his allergy was severe, and he was careless. He pretended he wasn't vulnerable. I worried someone might use it against him." "Oh," Agatha said faintly. "And the photo," Beth whispered. "I kept it because I'm pathetic. I wanted to forget him, but I couldn't. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to ruin Polly's happiness. I thought I could handle it." Agatha crossed her arms even as something inside her softened. "And the argument the barman heard?" Beth's face flushed. "I told Gavin I couldn't stand beside him at the wedding pretending we were strangers. He told me to grow up. He said if Polly learnt the truth, he'd lose everything. He said I owed him silence." Agatha's anger sharpened. "Owed him? The man was shameless." Beth swallowed. "I ran away today because I thought everyone would blame me. And because someone knows about the past. Someone has been leaving me notes, saying I'd better stay quiet. I thought Gavin wrote them. Now I don't know." A new thread twisted into the case. Blackmail. But aimed at whom? "Beth," Agatha said quietly, "did you tell anyone else about Gavin before the wedding?" "No, only one person. My father. And he told me to forget it. Howard Tranter again. Another layer of secrets. Beth trembled. Agatha, who would want him dead? Half of Mercester, Agatha muttered. But that doesn't help much. Beth wiped her eyes. Should I go to the police? Yes, Agatha said firmly, but not tonight. Tonight you go somewhere warm, safe, and discreet. Tomorrow we tell Bill everything. Beth nodded weakly. Thank you. Agatha guided her toward the lane until Beth disappeared into the shadowy footpath toward a friend's cottage. She returned to her car, sat heavily, and let the engine tick in the cool air. So Beth wasn't the murderer. She was a frightened girl caught in someone else's game, which meant someone else had been pulling strings. Beth hadn't killed Gavin, which meant someone far calmer and far more deliberate had used the chaos she created. Agatha stared through the windscreen, cigarette forgotten. Blackmail, secrets, warnings. Someone had wanted Gavin silent. Someone had wanted Beth terrified. Hodge's empty carrier sat on the back seat, a reminder of home. Agatha sighed and turned the key. She needed tea and clarity. Under the faint stars, she drove back toward Carsley, mind sharp as ever, knowing the real killer was still out there. Start talking, Agatha said, though her voice came out softer than she liked. The car interior felt too close, too warm, despite the cold lane outside. Beth hunched beside her on the passenger seat, fingers twisting together as if she could wring truth out of her own skin. Like I told you before, I panicked, but I never meant to kill him, Beth whispered. Begin at the bit where you vanished, Agatha snapped. People don't run away unless they've something dreadful on their conscience, or unless they're prone to melodrama. You don't strike me as the melodramatic type. Beth gave a ragged noise that might have been a laugh. You'd be surprised. Agatha's irritation wobbled. The girl looked ruinously tired, more ghost than bridesmaid. Well, Agatha pressed, get on with it. The story tumbled out in fits and starts. Gavin had courted Beth first, quietly, deliberately. He said he could help my family, she murmured. He knew Howard had business troubles. He said he'd make introductions, invest in the right places. He made me feel necessary. Her voice thinned. I believed him. Of course you did, Agatha said, though privately she wondered how any woman could fall for Gavin's showroom polish. Still, loneliness was a universal lever. She knew that too well. When he switched to Polly, Beth continued, he said it was better for everyone. Better match, better money, better image, and then, she swallowed. He kept letters, photographs, nothing scandalous but just compromising enough. He told me if I ever spoke up, he'd ruin everything for me. My fiancé doesn't know about Gavin. I thought I could bury it. Agatha's engine ticked faintly as it cooled. So, you tried to frighten him, Agatha said. The hen night banner? Beth nodded miserably. I wrote it with the florist's marker. I knew he'd guess it was me. I hoped he'd panic and delay the wedding. I never meant it as a threat. I didn't want Polly humiliated. I just wanted him to stop. And the floral arch? I didn't do that, Beth said quickly. I'm reckless, but not cruel. Agatha sniffed. Reckless hardly covers it, dear girl. Beth's hands shook. I only wanted a scare, something to force a delay. I'd been reading about anaphylaxis because I was frightened someone else might use his allergy against him. Agatha's spine stiffened. Researching allergies? That looks very bad. I know. Tears brightened her eyes. On the wedding morning I bought antihistamines. I thought, if I could trigger something small, something manageable, he'd end up in hospital for a day. It would postpone the wedding. He'd have time to realize I wasn't bluffing about going to Polly. You meddled with nut oil, Agatha said flatly. Beth nodded. Just a tiny smear on his spare cake fork. A smear. Her shoulders shook. I panicked. I wiped it off later. Properly wiped. I swear it. I never touched the champagne, Beth added desperately. I didn't even go near the bottle. You underestimated fate, Agatha muttered. Never do that. Fate adores dramatic irony. Beth stared at her lap. When he collapsed, I thought I'd killed him. I ran. That was cowardly, I know. I couldn't face Polly. I couldn't face anyone. You didn't look like a killer when you flagged me down, Agatha observed. You looked like someone halfway swallowed by guilt. Beth let out a choking sigh. I came back because I want to turn myself in. I need to tell the truth before the police decide I meant to murder him. Oh, They'll assume the worst, Agatha said. They always do. But your story, well, it explains the clues and still leaves an awkward gap. Beth looked startled. Gap? Yes, gap. If you didn't touch the champagne, someone else did. Someone who knew about the allergy. Someone who'd benefit from Gavin being permanently unavailable. Beth closed her eyes. I thought telling you would make things clearer. I'm afraid clarity is rarely my companion, Agatha said briskly. But I do have questions. Beth braced herself. Why confess to me, not Bill? Agatha asked. He's a policeman. A kind one, usually. Because you don't frighten me the way the police do, Beth whispered. And you don't look at me like I'm wicked. Agatha sniffed. Don't I? Must be losing my edge. For a moment they sat quietly, two women bound by the darkness of another's deceit. Agatha felt an inconvenient tug of sympathy. Beth had done foolish things, dangerous things, but there was a terrified sincerity in her that softened Agatha's judgment against her will. She reached for the car door handle. Right. I need tea and possibly a custard cream before I can think properly. Get out. You'll meet Mrs. Bloxby with me. She'll help classify this as a moral misstep rather than villainy. Beth's relief flickered like a fragile flame. Thank you, Miss Raisin. Really. Don't thank me. I haven't decided if you're innocent or simply incompetent. Agatha paused. Though frankly, incompetence seems the kinder verdict. They drove to Carsley in strained silence. At the vicarage kitchen, Mrs. Bloxby listened to Beth's confession with calm, sorrowful patience. When Beth left the room to splash water on her face, Agatha marched to the window. Well, Agatha demanded, do you believe her? Mrs. Bloxby folded her hands. I believe she's telling the truth about what she did, but perhaps not about what mattered most. Agatha stared. Meaning? Sometimes, said Mrs. Bloxby gently, a frightened person confesses the worst thing they're guilty of, not the worst thing that happened. Agatha considered this, so she might truly have wiped off the nut oil. Indeed. Leaving space, Agatha murmured, for someone else's handiwork. Mrs. Bloxby gave a tiny nod. The real question is, who else knew enough to act decisively? Agatha paced, thoughts snapping into uncomfortable shapes. Beth had provided scandal, motive, opportunity, but not the fatal blow. Someone else had threaded a needle through those messy events. Back home, Agatha stared at the mantelpiece while Hodge kneaded a cushion with entitled delicacy. There, beside a stray envelope, lay a glossy business card, Serena's immaculate logo gleaming with ruthless professionalism. Agatha tapped it with her nail. You'd turn a disaster into a selling point, wouldn't you? Hodge yawned, a slow, unimpressed judgment. Agatha exhaled through her nose. Right, tea first, investigations later. Agatha's night was a restless parade of half-shaped theories. She woke early, irritation driving her to pace the sitting room, while Hodge observed from the armchair like an unimpressed magistrate. Beth's confession explained plenty, but not enough. Something crucial lay outside her account, lurking like a missing page. By mid-morning she had marched herself to the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby welcomed her with gentle warmth and the kind of tea that suggested steadying moral support. "You've been thinking," the vicar's wife said kindly. "Thinking and fuming," Agatha corrected. Beth all but gift-wrapped a motive, but there's still a missing link. Someone else must have taken advantage of her little allergy experiment. Or simply acted independently, Mrs. Bloxby offered. "Exactly," Agatha said. "And I keep coming back to Serena. She thrives on spectacle. Disaster is her native currency." Mrs. Bloxby frowned softly. "It's uncharitable to assume she would kill for a business opportunity." "People have killed for ugly reasons," Agatha muttered. "Why not stylish ones?" Yet even as she said it, doubt prickled. Serena could be ruthless, but she also loved polished outcomes. Murder was rarely tidy. Agatha needed more information. She rang Charles, who arrived in his battered convertible looking amused. "You've got the hound and fox expression again," he said. "I'm the hound," Agatha snapped, "and someone is most definitely the fox." They revisited the wedding venue. Staff were still subdued, voices lowered to respectful murmurs. Charles distracted the receptionist with shameless flirtation, while Agatha prowled the reception room like a bulldog in heels. Several waiters remembered the chaos of the toast. One mentioned Serena barking orders about lighting. Another recalled Leo's sour mood. A third noted that Mr. Withers had nearly tripped over a floral display, muttering curses about developers. Nothing new, nothing sharp, nothing fatal. Agatha felt her temper fray. She stalked into the corridor, where Charles caught up with her. "You're glaring at the carpet," he observed. "Has it offended you?" "I'm missing something," she said. "Beth's confession should have tied everything together. Instead, it's unraveled the tightening thread." Charles tucked his hands into his pockets. "Beth wasn't lying, I think." "Of course she wasn't lying," Agatha snapped. "Lying requires composure. Beth has the emotional steadiness of a blancmange." "So," Charles said mildly, "someone else used the nut oil." "Obviously," Agatha said. "But who had access? Who had motive? And who had the nerve to strike in the middle of a crowded room?" They returned to Castley as twilight crept over the hedgerows. Agatha's mind churned. Beth's banner warning, the floral arch sabotage, the overheard arguments, all pieces, but not the picture. At home, Hodge greeted them with disdainful meows. Charles flopped onto the sofa. "You want to talk it out?" he asked. "No," Agatha said, pacing. "I want the truth to arrive in a neat envelope." She paused. "Envelopes." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Must everything become a revelation?" "Leo's envelope," Agatha said slowly. "The one Bill checked. It held revised business projections. Boring as dishwater. But what if Gavin hid something else? Something removed before the envelope was opened?" "By whom?" Charles asked. "Someone who feared exposure more than chaos." She tapped a finger against her chin. "Someone practiced at seizing advantage. Someone who could slip through a room unnoticed." "Serena?" Charles guessed. "Perhaps," Agatha said, "but I need proof." The next morning brought no proof, only fresh frustration. Agatha decided she needed to revisit Beth. The girl deserved to know she wasn't the only suspect. But at the Tranter home, Lydia said Beth had gone to stay with a cousin. "For rest," Lydia said, wringing her hands. Howard appeared behind her, face tight. "Beth needs space," he said. "Best leave her alone." Agatha eyed him. His anxiety wasn't grief, but fear. Fear of what? Exposure? Scandal? Or the truth itself? Charles nudged her lightly. "We're wearing out our welcome." Agatha allowed herself to be shepherded back to the car. "Howard's hiding something," she muttered. "He's more frightened of the police than of losing his reputation." "People fear different things," Charles replied. "You fear wrinkles, for instance." Agatha glared. "I fear unsolved mysteries." Back home, Agatha spread her notes over the kitchen table. Hodge leapt onto the pile, flattening important clues with majestic disregard. "Get off," she grumbled. He refused. Agatha slumped into a chair. Beth had provided motive, opportunity for mischief, and a convenient confession, but not murder. Howard moved like a man guarding a secret. Serena thrived on chaos but preferred control. Leo burned with resentment but not cunning. Mr. Withers barked threats but lacked subtlety. Someone had seized the gap Beth created. Someone had stepped in at the perfect moment. Mrs. Bloxby arrived that afternoon with a basket of scones. "You look troubled," she said gently. "I am troubled," Agatha admitted. "Beth confessed to the worst thing she did. But the worst thing that happened wasn't hers." Mrs. Bloxby nodded. "Then find who benefited most." Agatha considered this. Gavin's death helped someone. Someone who needed him silent. Someone who understood how to disguise murder as misadventure. Her gaze drifted again to Serena's stark business card on the mantelpiece. A glint of polished ruthlessness winked back at her. Hodge stretched beside the kettle, tail flicking like a metronome of disapproval. Agatha sighed. "Fine, I'll keep digging, but if the truth doesn't present itself soon, I may need stronger tea." Hodge blinked slowly, unimpressed. The kettle clicked. The room warmed, and Agatha, bristling with renewed resolve, reached for her notebook, determined to prise the truth from the elegant lies surrounding Gavin Rich's death. "Roy, stop fussing and hand me the envelope," Agatha snapped, leaning across his cluttered desk as if she owned Evesham's entire high street. Roy, immaculate in a silver waistcoat far too glamorous for a Tuesday morning, sighed dramatically and passed her the folder. "You've bullied me into the earliest viewing slot of the week," he reminded her, flicking imaginary dust from his sleeve. "Photographers are delicate creatures, Aggie. They need gentle handling, like orchids or low self-esteem models. "Spare me," Agatha said. "This is an investigation, not a fashion shoot." Charles stretched his long legs and yawned. "Aggie's terrified Serena will get away with murder. That's why we're here at dawn." "It is not dawn," Agatha retorted, "and Serena won't get away with anything if people would stop prattling and start pointing me at evidence." The photographer bustled in from the back room, lugging a tray of proofs. He was a wiry man with a mop of greying curls and the eternally harassed expression of someone who spent his life coaxing smiles from children and bridal parties. "Mrs. Raisin? Mr. Silver?" "Sir," he greeted, bowing vaguely at Charles. "I've pulled the enlargements you asked for." Agatha pounced on them, spreading the glossy images across the table with a hunger bordering on affection. The reception photos showed the top table from every possible angle. Serena leaning in with her fixed smile, Leo slipping an envelope beside Gavin's plate, Beth adjusting the glasses, face strained, and guests drifting like confused wildlife on the edges. "There," Agatha said triumphantly, tapping one enlargement. "Look at the sequence. After Beth straightens the glasses, here, someone else changes them again before the toast. That hand belongs to a man. Look at the signet ring." Roy squinted. "Could be Leo. Could be Gavin. Could be... Oh, that's Howard's ring. He wears it like a badge of misery." Charles nodded slowly. Poor man's idea of status. Agatha felt the delicious thrum of certainty. Howard tampered with the glasses. He must have meant to frighten Gavin into delaying the wedding, but perhaps he went further. "You intend to confront him, don't you?" Charles asked. "Of course I do," Agatha said briskly. "You're driving." Roy shuddered. "I'll stay here and protect the proofs. They need emotional support." Howard Tranter's office in Mercester was a miserable cave of filing cabinets and dying pot plants. Agatha swept in as though invading a rival kingdom. Howard looked up, already defeated, his spectacles halfway down his nose. "Mrs. Raisin," he said weakly, "this is a surprise." "You tampered with the wedding glasses," Agatha announced. "I have photographs." His mouth opened and closed like a startled goldfish. Then, with the exhaustion of a man who had run out of excuses weeks ago, he sagged into his chair. "I only wanted him to sign the revised agreement," he muttered. "He was threatening to seize the house, our home. He said he'd lease it to corporate guests for weekend retreats." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Charming behavior." Howard swallowed. "I leaned over him during the toasts. He wouldn't read the papers. I thought if I moved the glasses slightly, he'd notice the envelope and, oh, what does it matter now? He barely glanced before mocking me again. I swear I didn't put anything in the champagne. I wouldn't dare." Agatha watched him closely. Howard was a coward, not a killer. His hands trembled, but not with guilt, only the fear of a man caught in a web of debt, foolishness, and humiliation. "What about Serena?" Agatha pressed. Howard blinked. "Serena?" She swapped the champagne bottle just before the toast, claiming it was too warm and would embarrass the bride. Howard said she took the old one away and brought a fresh one. She was very insistent. A cold, precise click of logic settled into place in Agatha's mind. She straightened. "Thank you, Mr. Tranter. You've been helpful." Charles followed her outside. "You think Serena spiked the bottle?" "I do," Agatha said. "She knew the allergy details, she supervised every arrangement, and she's ruthless enough to treat a small incident as a marketing opportunity." Charles tucked his hands into his coat pockets. "What's your plan?" "Set a trap," Agatha said, already forming it. "Serena's weak spot is ambition. I'll lure her with money and flattery." Charles smirked. "Two things you understand very well." The W.I. Hall had not seen such frantic preparation since the Christmas bazaar. Agatha insisted on a respectable spread of biscuits and tea, though she rearranged everything 3 times before Serena arrived. Mrs. Bloxby watched with polite patience. "Don't overthink it, dear," she murmured. "Villains often trap themselves." "Not this one," Agatha muttered. "She's slippery." Charles set up chairs with aristocratic disdain, and Roy joined by telephone, his voice ringing through the handset like a theatrical spirit guide. At precisely 3 o'clock, Serena swept in. She wore immaculate grey, her lipstick sharp as a blade, her smile primed for conquest. "Mrs. Raisin," she said warmly, "and Mrs. Bloxby. What a pleasure. I'm delighted to discuss potential collaborations. The Cotswolds are ripe for luxury events." Quite, Agatha purred. We want someone with vision and resilience. You handled the wedding tragedy beautifully. Serena's eyes gleamed. Crisis management is a speciality of mine. Discretion, speed, and adaptability. Speaking of adaptability, Roy's voice chimed from the table phone. How do you deal with, let's say, unexpected health emergencies, allergies, mishaps? Serena preened. Oh, I plan for everything. I double-check every bottle. Well, every important one. Agatha felt the air tighten. Mrs. Bloxby's knitting stilled. Charles, leaning against the hall door, tilted his head ever so slightly. Agatha slid the photographs across the table. Then perhaps you could explain this sequence, and your bottle swap, and why only one bottle required your personal inspection. For a heartbeat, Serena's expression froze. Then she laughed lightly. Really, Mrs. Raisin, I simply ensured the top table was served correctly. Appearances matter. Bill Wong stepped from the adjoining room with weary authority. Appearances matter, yes. So does murder. Serena's eyes widened. Not with guilt, Agatha thought, but with fury at being caught before she could spin the story herself. You have no proof, Serena snapped. Oh, but we do, Agatha said softly. Beth's aborted plan created confusion. You exploited it. You swapped the bottle when no one was looking. You knew Gavin's allergy from your exhaustive questionnaires, and you wanted him desperate, dependent on you for damage control. You wanted control, not murder, but control turned lethal. You meant a scare. Instead, you killed him. Serena's breath trembled, then steadied. Gavin was a liability, a ticking bomb. I nudged him toward postponing, that's all. The fatal dose wasn't my fault. Bill shook his head. You'll have to explain that to the magistrate. And with that, Serena Blake's veneer cracked at last. Serena's arrest unfolded with the dull inevitability of a rehearsal. Bill escorted her to his car while she issued sharp, incredulous protests about misinterpretation, overreach, and professional sabotage. Agatha watched her go with a complex tangle of triumph and disappointment. She'll claim it was an accident, Charles observed, a businesswoman's miscalculation. Agatha folded her arms. Poisoning a man with nut oil isn't a scheduling mistake. Mrs. Bloxby rested a gentle hand on Agatha's sleeve. Even villains have reasons, dear. Some pitiable, some foolish. Some profitable, Agatha muttered. They returned to Castley in thoughtful silence. Word travelled faster than they did. By the time Agatha reached her cottage, Doris Simpson was pretending not to hover near the front garden. Bill's mother was ringing Mrs. Bloxby for reassurance, and the WI group chat had already produced 3 theories, 1 hymn suggestion and a casserole rota for Lydia Tranter. Agatha shut her door firmly. "Hodge, I'm home," she called, though the cat already perched on the kitchen table like a critic awaiting review. He blinked at her, unimpressed. She lit a cigarette, then caught Mrs. Bloxby's concerned expression and stubbed it out again with theatrical reluctance. "Fine, I'll have tea instead." The kettle hissed. Hodge purred judgmentally. Before she could fully savour her domestic victory, the doorbell shrilled. Charles stood on the step, collar up, eyebrows raised. "Thought you'd want to know. Beth has asked for you." Agatha tutted. "I suppose we're collecting broken people today." Beth Tranter sat on the vicarage sofa, wrapped in Mrs. Bloxby's softest blanket, looking like a woman carved from regret. Her eyes were red but steady. "I heard about Serena," she said quietly as Agatha entered. "Bill told me. I needed someone to explain what happens now." Agatha sank into a chair opposite her. "Now? You stop thinking you're a murderer." Beth flinched. "But I planned. Something stupid. I took the marker. I wrote the banner. I didn't touch the arch. I swear that wasn't me. I meant to frighten him." "And you didn't kill him," Agatha said firmly. "Your poor choices don't add up to homicide." Beth's shoulders slumped. "He ruined so much, and I let him." Mrs. Bloxby brought tea, her kind eyes soft. "Guilt can linger even when innocence is proven." Agatha harumphed. "You researched allergies because you were terrified, not malicious. You cleaned the fork. You fled because you panicked. Serena exploited your chaos." Beth clasped her hands. "Will the police believe that?" "They already do," Charles said gently from the doorway. "Bill is filing the paperwork. You're cleared." Beth's tears slipped silently. Not grief, Agatha thought, but the strange hollow that follows relief. She stood awkwardly, unsure how to comfort without compromising her hard-won brusqueness. "Well," she said gruffly, "don't make a habit of trusting handsome developers." A faint smile touched Beth's mouth. "I'll try." Agatha walked home with Charles, who offered her his arm in an exaggerated courtly gesture. She took it anyway. "You handled that well," he remarked. "I handled it truthfully," she corrected, "which is not always the same as well." "Modesty doesn't suit you, Aggie." "Nothing suits me anymore, not even that mauve bridesmaid dress." Charles laughed, and Agatha allowed herself a small, pleased smirk. Back at the cottage, the night settled softly around them. Charles made tea while Agatha flicked through Serena's abandoned business card, now pinned on her mantle with a note that simply read, "Motives seldom sparkle." She turned it over. "I should have trusted my instincts earlier." "You did," Charles replied. "They just took the scenic route." She rolled her eyes. "You're insufferable." "True." He gathered his coat. "Come on, you need sleep." After he left, Agatha stood in the dim kitchen, the kettle's warmth rising like a sigh. She scratched Hodge behind the ears, earning a haughty chirrup. "Well, Hodge," she murmured, "another murderer unmasked, another village scandal, and still no one appreciates my brilliance." Hodge stretched luxuriously, then curled into her lap, as if awarding her the only praise that mattered. Agatha smiled despite herself. "Fine, you win." The kettle clicked softly, the cottage settled, and Agatha Raisin, weary, vain, triumphant, and oddly wistful, allowed herself to be still just for a moment before gossip, glory, and mischief called her back again. Agatha's telephone rang far too early for comfort, jangling through the cosy quiet of her cottage. Hodge, affronted, lifted one ear from the sofa cushion. Agatha grabbed the receiver with a growl. This had better be important or glamorous. It was neither. It was Doris Simpson reporting, with breathless authority, that Mrs. Timms from the shop had already told 3 customers that the Tranter wedding had been cursed, and one of them claimed Gavin Rich had been seen walking near Mercester in the moonlight. Agatha hung up without comment. Village rumour was, at its worst, a kind of amateur necromancy. Carsley had slipped back into its familiar rhythm, though with added relish for tragedy. Over tea and scones, villagers debated funeral prices, hotel liability, moral failings, modern greed, and whether Gavin's suit had been rented or bought. Agatha pretended to find the gossip tiresome, but she stored every detail with forensic efficiency. Her own mood wavered between satisfaction and a peculiar restlessness that always followed the end of a case, like standing at the edge of a stage after the audience had gone home. Polly Tranter reappeared first, pale and neat, escorted by her mother. Lydia all but pushed her through Agatha's door before scampering away, as though exposure to truth might be contagious. Polly perched on the sofa's edge. "Mrs. Raisin, I don't know how to say this, except thank you, for finding what happened, for clearing Beth, for everything." Agatha was unused to gratitude, at least when freely given. "I only did what needed doing," she said briskly, "and what no one else was clever enough to attempt." Polly swallowed. "I also wanted to pay you back for the bridesmaid dress. It seems unfair you had to, well, wear it." Hodge leapt onto the mauve satin heap resting on a nearby chair, kneading it as though confirming its unworthiness. Agatha waved the idea away. "Keep your money, I'll keep the dress. It's hideous, but it cost me dignity, and I like to own my losses." Polly managed a faint smile, then dissolved into quiet tears. She grieved, Agatha realized, less for Gavin than for the dream he represented. Escape from the poky Tranter house, from village judgment, from a future that had never belonged to her. It made Agatha unexpectedly gentle. "You're young," she muttered, "and prettier than you realize. You'll recover." After Polly left, Charles appeared, as he often did, without knocking. "Well," he said, helping himself to a biscuit, "have you been saintly?" "I've been practical," Agatha replied. "Someone in this village has to be." He grinned. "You're becoming the bridesmaid to everyone's disasters." She bristled, then grudgingly acknowledged the accuracy. "If you call me that again, I'll ruin your next soiree." Charles lounged by the fire. "It's a compliment, Aggie. People trust you, even when they shouldn't." She sniffed. Nonsense. But the truth hovered around her like a smug cat. She did like being necessary. Mrs. Blocksby invited her for tea later that afternoon. The vicarage smelled of baking, tranquility, and moral safety. 3 things Agatha distrusted on principle but secretly enjoyed. Beth was there as well, eyes still ringed with exhaustion but no longer hollow. "My fiancé is giving me another chance," Beth said quietly. "We talked for hours. He said one mistake isn't the whole of me." Agatha took a quick, private breath. She admired a man who could forgive decisively. It was a rare skill. "Good," she said. "But don't expect the village to forget. They'll try, but scandal clings like cheap perfume." Beth nodded. "I know. We're thinking of a tiny wedding somewhere far away. Maybe Gretna. No champagne." Mrs. Blocksby smiled warmly. "Fresh beginnings don't need crowds." Agatha set down her teacup. "You can stop worrying now. Serena's emails, Bill's reports, the doctored bottle, they've tied up every loose end. You're officially cleared." Beth sagged in relief, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you." Mrs. Blocksby gave Agatha a meaningful look. You see, her reluctance to stand beside Gavin wasn't vanity. It was conscience. Agatha snorted. "My reluctance was entirely aesthetic. Mauve does nothing for my complexion." But the remark lingered. Even vanity had its layers. 2 days later, Agatha found herself staring at the mauve bridesmaid dress hanging from her wardrobe door. It looked apologetic, as though it wished it had been born another colour. A satin ribbon had slipped free and dangled to the carpet, where Hodge launched a half-hearted attack on it before flopping down to nap. She sat on the edge of her bed, cigarette unlit between her fingers. Solved mysteries always brought a hollow aftertaste. Not quite sadness. Agatha did not allow herself such indulgence, but a thin, unsettled melancholy. The house was too quiet, the phone too still. She was too aware of her own company. She told herself she liked being alone. She told herself often enough that it nearly felt true. Lighting the cigarette in defiance of the silence, she watched the smoke coil upward, carrying with it the last frayed threads of the Tranter wedding. Somewhere beyond Carsley's hedgerows, life would resume for Polly, Beth, Lydia, even Howard, patched, embarrassed, altered. But Agatha's own life would remain exactly where it was, perched between chaos and domesticity, longing and irritation. She exhaled slowly. "Better suited to solving other people's romantic catastrophes than managing my own," she muttered. Hodge blinked up at her, unimpressed. Agatha stubbed out the cigarette, stood and crossed to the telephone. Already her mind was buzzing with the faint promise of new trouble. Someone in the village, any village, would soon have a problem requiring her superior intellect, presence, and unmatched flair for drama. There was always another quarrel, another scandal, another wedding teetering toward disaster. She lifted the receiver. "Carsley isn't going to sort itself out," she told Hodge. He yawned deeply, stretched across the bed, and settled into the warm dent she had left behind. Agatha smiled despite herself. "Fine," she said. "I'll sort it." And with that, Agatha Raisin stepped neatly back into the role she loved most, the woman who arrived too early, stayed too long, meddled too deeply, and solved everything anyway.